The address disappeared the moment I refreshed the page, but the person texting me still knew exactly where I was standing. The listing had appeared just after midnight, tucked between broken office chairs and suspiciously clean mattresses. A gray 3-seater sofa for an almost insulting price. The photos were poorly lit, but the couch itself looked nearly new. No stains, no sagging cushions, just a faint impression that someone had recently been sitting on the right-hand side. The description was simple. Must go tonight. First come, first served, cash only. I should have scrolled past it. Instead, I felt that little surge of excitement people get when they think they have found a bargain that other people have not noticed yet. I messaged the seller, expecting nothing. The reply came instantly. Can you pick up now? It was already past midnight, but curiosity beat common sense. I said yes, and within seconds a location pin appeared in the chat. It was an address I half recognized. A quiet part of town near an old industrial stretch that had never really recovered after the warehouses shut down. I checked the listing one more time before leaving. It was still there. I grabbed my car keys, told no one where I was going, and left my flat. The streets were almost empty. Street lamps flickered softly in the mist, painting everything in a dull orange glow. With each turn, the area felt less familiar. The buildings grew darker, the shops long closed, their windows either boarded up or broken. My phone guided me to a narrow road that barely looked used. At the end of it stood a single duplex house, paint peeling, front yard overgrown. This is it, the seller messaged. I parked across the road and looked at the house. No lights on, no movement behind the windows. My phone vibrated again. Come in. Side entrance is open. A tightness formed in my chest. Before I even stepped out of the car, I swiped back to the listing to check it one last time. It was gone. No loading error, no warning. Just a refreshed screen with different ads in its place, as if it had never existed. When I tried to click the chat, it redirected to my normal inbox. The profile of the seller was empty. No name, no history, nothing. Yet my phone buzzed again in my hand. Why are you waiting outside? I froze. My eyes lifted slowly from the screen to the house. The curtains at the front window were slightly parted. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt certain someone was looking back at me. How did you know I am outside? I typed, my thumbs trembling. Because I can see you. The message appeared instantly, like it had already been prepared. A weird heat flushed through my body. I scanned the yard, the upper windows, the space around the door. There was still no visible movement, no shadows shifting, no silhouette stepping closer. Just the weak scrape of a tree branch along the side of the house. You said you wanted the sofa, right? The phone buzzed again. Come inside and get it. Against every instinct, I stepped out of the car. The air felt colder the moment my door shut. It smelled damp, metallic. My footsteps sounded too loud against the pavement as I crossed the road and approached the side of the house. The door was ajar, exactly as the seller had said. A thin strip of darkness lay between it and the frame. Hello, I called out. No answer. The phone buzzed in my hand again. It is in the living room, just inside. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and stale. I could hear faint dripping somewhere deeper in the house, like a slow, patient clock. For a moment, I simply stood there, letting my eyes adjust. Then I saw it. The sofa was right there, placed neatly in the middle of the living room, as if staged. But something was wrong. The deep indent on the right cushion I had noticed in the photo was more pronounced now, as if someone had just stood up from it seconds earlier. Hello, I called again, my voice strangely muted by the space. Nothing answered, but my phone vibrated once more. Sit on it. Test it. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Why, I typed back. To make sure it is comfortable. A long silence followed. The dripping sound somewhere in the house seemed to grow louder. My skin crawled as I stepped closer to the sofa. The fabric looked clean, but the smell around it was faintly sour. As I leaned forward to touch the cushion, something on the coffee table caught my eye. Another phone. It was lying face up, screen already on, displaying my name. Before I could react, my own phone vibrated violently in my hand. Do you feel it? The text read. Behind me, I heard the faint but unmistakable sound of someone breathing, slow and steady, far too close to be mine. I didn't turn around, I ran. I burst back through the side door and sprinted to my car, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my keys. When the engine finally roared to life, I didn't look back. I drove until the streets looked familiar again, until the sky began to hint at dawn. Later that morning, I checked the site again. I searched every possible variation of the sofa ad. Nothing. It was as if it had never been posted, except for one new message sitting quietly in my inbox. Still interested. Below it was a new address. This time it was my own. The green light flickered on in the dark. I was certain I had not opened the laptop. I had bought it 3 days earlier from an online listing that seemed ordinary enough. The seller claimed it was barely used, a spare from an old project, and priced it low for a quick sale. The metal casing was clean, the keys barely worn, the screen free from scratches. It felt like a rare, practical find. I remember thinking how lucky I was as I carried it back to my flat, the faint scent of dust and cold air clinging to it. The first night passed without incident. I used it to answer emails and browse aimlessly before falling asleep with it on the desk. When I woke the next morning, it was exactly where I had left it. The camera light was off, the lid closed. Nothing unusual. It was only on the second night that something began to feel wrong. I was lying in the dark, drifting in and out of sleep, when the room filled with a faint glow. At first I thought it was my phone, but when I opened my eyes, the glow came from the desk. The small camera light above the laptop screen was on, steady, unblinking. I sat up slowly. The lid was still closed. "Hello," I whispered, knowing how ridiculous it sounded to talk to an inanimate object. The light turned off. In the silence that followed, I convinced myself it had been a glitch, some leftover power in the system. I stood up, opened the laptop and checked the camera settings. Everything looked normal. No apps were running, no permissions granted. I even covered the camera with a small piece of tape just to be safe before going back to bed. Sleep came slowly, but eventually it came. The next day I noticed something odd on the hard drive. A new folder had appeared on the desktop, labeled with a long string of numbers that meant nothing to me. Inside were 7 video files, all stamped with dates and times from the previous night. My stomach tightened as I double-clicked the first one. The video opened to a grainy night vision view of my own bedroom. The angle was from the laptop camera pointed directly at my bed. I was lying there, asleep, one arm hanging off the edge, my chest rising and falling in the faint green hue. I watched the entire 30-second clip, barely breathing. Nothing happened in it. No movement, no intruder, just me, sleeping. The second clip was longer. In it, I shifted in my sleep, turned slightly towards the camera. The tape ID placed over the lens was now visible as a dark blur in the corner of the screen. I felt a cold dread spread through me as I closed the video player. Someone had been recording me. I wanted to believe it was the previous owner, some hidden malware automatically activating the camera. But the dates were from last night in my room, on my desk. I immediately ran a full system scan. Nothing. No suspicious software. No remote access programs. Still, I deleted the entire folder and emptied the recycle bin, as if that would erase what I had seen. That night, I pushed the laptop into a drawer and shut it completely. My phone lay beside me on the bed, my lamp glowing low. Every tiny sound in the flat seemed magnified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, even my own breathing. Then, around 2 in the morning, the light came back. It filtered through the thin gap around the drawer, a sharp green line cutting across the ceiling. The camera was on again. This time, I did not go to it. I stared at the faint glow from my bed, my body rigid. I listened, straining for any other sound, any sign that I was not alone. But there was only the quiet electric buzz of the device. My phone vibrated suddenly in my hand, an unknown number. "Why did you move it?" My heart almost stopped. I didn't respond. Seconds later, another message came in. It had a better view before. The green light brightened briefly, then steadied. I forced myself to sit up. Every part of me screamed not to look, but I needed to see. The drawer was slightly open now, even though I knew I had shut it properly. The laptop lid had been lifted to a narrow angle, just enough for the camera to peer through. Something else caught my eye on the screen. A reflection. I could see my bed, the green-tinged outline of my body, and behind it, near the doorway, a faint, darker shape standing perfectly still. I spun around. The doorway was empty. When I looked back at the laptop screen, the shape had moved closer. Another text message. "Don't worry, I just like to watch." I grabbed my phone and fled the bed, flipping on every light as I moved through the flat. There was no one there. Every door was locked, every window was shut, yet the feeling of being watched did not leave. I packed the laptop into a bag that very night. The next morning, I took it to a repair shop and asked them to wipe it completely, replace any internal camera components, anything to make it safe. The technician called me back 2 hours later, his voice low and uneasy. "There's nothing wrong with your camera," he said. "In fact, this model doesn't even have one installed." A cold numbness settled over me. "Then how was it recording?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Are you sure those videos came from this laptop?" I looked down at my phone. The latest saved file from the previous night was still there, one I had been too afraid to open. I opened it now. The screen filled once again with my bedroom, the same eerie green tint. Only this time, the room was empty. The bed was neatly made. No sign of me at all. And then, from the edge of the frame, I slowly stepped into view. But I knew, standing there in the repair shop with the phone in my hand, that I had never been in my room at that moment. The figure on the screen turned its head slightly, just enough for me to see its eyes. They were already looking straight at the camera. I watched him carry the mirror out of my door. The next morning, it was watching me from inside the spare room. I had listed the mirror on Craigslist almost as an afterthought. It was tall, framed in dark wood that had once been polished but now looked dull and weary, like it had grown tired of reflecting the same room every day. It had belonged to my aunt, who passed away months earlier, and despite my best efforts to make the flat feel like my own, the mirror had always unsettled me. It made the spare room feel occupied. Every time I passed it, I felt an odd certainty that something in the reflection was slightly delayed, as though it were deciding whether or not to follow me. The buyer's message came late in the evening. No greeting, no questions about condition. Just a short line. Can collect tonight. I hesitated, staring at the words on my screen as the room darkened around me. I told him it was rather late. Another message arrived almost immediately. Tonight is needed. There was something about the phrasing that made my skin prickle. Still, the thought of finally getting rid of the mirror filled me with relief, and after a moment, I sent him my address. He arrived just after 10. There was no engine noise, no headlights sweeping across my walls. Just a soft knock at my door, so gentle I almost missed it. When I opened it, the corridor light barely illuminated him. He was tall, thin, dressed in a simple dark jacket. His face was pale, and his eyes seemed too focused, locked straight onto the space behind me where the mirror stood. "You're here for the mirror," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," he replied. His voice was flat but calm. He didn't step in until I moved aside, and even then, his steps were slow and deliberate, like he was walking into familiar territory. "You don't want to inspect it?" I asked. He didn't answer. He went straight to the spare room and stood before the mirror. For a long moment, he simply stared at his own reflection. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable, broken only by the faint buzz of the corridor light outside and the soft hum of my refrigerator. Then he nodded once. "It is ready." "Ready for what?" I wanted to ask. Instead, I watched as he lifted the mirror with surprising ease. The moment it left the floor, the room felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath all this time. "I'll take it," he said, turning towards the door. He didn't haggle. He didn't ask for change. He handed me the exact amount in cash, the notes strangely cold in my hands. I followed him to the doorway, half expecting him to struggle with the weight, but he didn't. He stepped out into the corridor, the mirror balanced easily in his arms, and disappeared into the dim light beyond my door. I locked up immediately, double-latching the deadbolt, and stood there for a moment in silence. The spare room behind me felt empty in a way that was almost unsettling. Still, a sense of relief slowly replaced the unease. I had finally gotten rid of it. That night I slept poorly. Sometime before dawn I woke to a faint sound that seemed to come from inside the flat. A soft, dragging scrape, like furniture being shifted across a hard floor. I lay still, listening, my heart starting to pound. The sound came again, slower this time, almost careful. It stopped just as suddenly as it had started. I told myself it was the building settling. Old pipes, old walls. Anything but what my mind insisted was impossible. Morning light eventually crept through the curtains. The ordinary sounds of the street below began to drift up. Feeling foolish, I got out of bed and walked towards the front door to start my day. That was when I saw the footprints. They were muddy, dark against the pale tiles. Clear shoe prints leading from the gap under my door, across the living room, and down the short hallway towards the spare room. My throat went dry. I hadn't opened the door. No one had knocked. The locks were still intact. And yet, there they were, as if someone had simply walked through the door itself. Slowly, I followed them. Each step felt heavier than the last. A quiet dread crept over my skin as I reached the spare room. The door was slightly ajar. I knew, deep down, what I was going to see, but nothing could have prepared me for the way my stomach sank when I pushed it open. The mirror was standing in its old place, perfectly upright against the far wall. It looked exactly as it had the day before. Same worn frame, same faint mark in the lower right corner. But the glass was different. It was clearer, sharper, almost expectant. I stared into it, and for a moment all I saw was myself standing there, pale, wide-eyed, barely breathing. Then something shifted, just slightly. My reflection did not move when I moved my hand. It remained perfectly still, watching me, studying me. Behind the reflection, I saw him, not in the room, in the mirror. The quiet man stood just over my shoulder, his head tilted, his eyes fixed on mine through the glass. He raised one finger to his lips, a silent request for calm, for silence. I could see his mouth move, though no sound came out. "It is ready," he mouthed again. The air in the spare room turned icy, wrapping around me, pressing against my chest. I wanted to turn around, to prove that nothing was there, but my body would not listen. My reflection slowly began to smile, even though my own face remained frozen in fear. Then the reflection blinked, and I did not. That is when I realized the truth. He had never taken the mirror. He had only delivered it. And now something else was waiting on the other side, ready to take me instead.